I never imagined my life would change so drastically in just a matter of days. My father, Richard Sinclair, was a powerful, well-respected businessman who built Sinclair Enterprises from the ground up. His leadership, intelligence, and intimidating presence made him a legend in the corporate world. And now he was gone. The news of his sudden death hit like a wrecking ball, shattering the illusion of stability I had always associated with him. I was still in shock when I sat in the grand boardroom of Sinclair Enterprises, facing a group of top executives, each of them with years of experience under my father's reign. The air was thick with tension as they stared at me, their expressions ranging from disdain to outright hostility. "Let's cut to the chase," said Gregory Marsh, the company's longest-serving manager. His voice was sharp, authoritative, as if he had already decided the outcome of this meeting. "We understand that the company is now under your control, but let's be honest, Logan. You are not your father." I clenched my fists under the table. I knew this was coming. They had no faith in me. I had spent years distancing myself from my father's business empire, choosing instead to work in a smaller company, learning from the ground up. But that didn't matter to them. All they saw was a privileged son who had no place in the high-stakes world of corporate leadership. "If you take over as president," Gregory continued, leaning forward, "we'll all walk. Every single one of us." A murmur of agreement spread through the room. Some executives exchanged glances, nodding. Others sat stone-faced, waiting to see my reaction. I exhaled slowly, looking at each of them. These were the same people who had worked under my father for decades. They had been loyal to him, but their loyalty didn't extend to me. That was fine. I wasn't looking for their approval. I leaned forward, mirroring Gregory's posture. "Thank you." Gregory frowned. "Excuse me." "You heard me." I straightened, my voice calm but firm. "If you want to leave, the door is open. No one is forcing you to stay." The room fell silent. They had expected a plea, a desperate attempt to hold on to power. But I wasn't my father, and I wouldn't play their game. I had no intention of proving myself to people who had already decided I was a failure. Gregory's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," I admitted. "Or maybe I'm about to build something even better." The challenge was set. And whether they stayed or left, I was ready to take control of my father's empire, on my own terms. As expected, Gregory Marsh and several other top executives handed in their resignations the next morning. Their departure sent shockwaves through the company. Some employees panicked, fearing instability, while others whispered about my audacity to let them go without a fight. But I had no regrets. If they couldn't respect my leadership, they weren't needed. I sat in my father's office, the office that was now mine. The heavy oak desk, the towering bookshelves, the large window overlooking the city, it all felt foreign. His presence lingered in every corner, but he was gone and I had to step up. I wasn't here to be a shadow of my father. I was here to redefine Sinclair Enterprises. "Logan, we have a problem," said Olivia Carter, my father's former assistant, now my most trusted ally. She stepped into the office, holding a tablet with financial reports. "With the top executives leaving, investors are getting nervous. Stocks are dipping, and there's talk of a hostile takeover." I rubbed my temple, feeling the weight of the moment. "Who's leading the takeover attempt?" "Weston and Company," Olivia replied. "Your father's biggest rival." Course. Charles Weston had been circling Sinclair Enterprises like a vulture for years, waiting for a moment of weakness. And now, with my father gone and the company in turmoil, he saw his opportunity. I stood up, determination settling in my chest. "Then we shut him down before he gets the chance." Olivia arched a brow. "And how do you propose we do that?" Smirk. "We remind everyone that Sinclair Enterprises isn't just Richard Sinclair. It's the people who believe in this company, the ones who want to build something great." That afternoon I called for an emergency company-wide meeting. Employees from every department filled the auditorium, uncertainty written across their faces. I took the stage, gripping the microphone, and for the first time, I addressed them not as Richard Sinclair's son, but as their new leader. I know things seem unstable right now. I began, my voice steady. Some of you may be wondering if this company will survive. Let me assure you it will. But not because of my father's legacy. It will survive because of us. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I continued. Sinclair Enterprises has always been about innovation, about pushing boundaries. That won't change. I won't pretend to be my father, but I promise you this. I will fight for this company, for all of you, and for a future that we can build together. Silence filled the room, and then, one by one, employees started clapping. A slow, hesitant applause that grew into a thunderous roar. In that moment I knew. I had won their trust. The old guard had left, but the heart of Sinclair Enterprises remained. As the meeting ended, Olivia walked up to me, a rare smile playing on her lips. That was impressive. I exhaled, a small grin forming. Now, let's show Weston that Sinclair Enterprises isn't for sale. The battle had just begun. The next morning I walked into the boardroom, ready for war. The remaining executives, still uneasy about my leadership, sat on one side of the long table. Across from them sat a group of lawyers, our legal team. I had called this meeting to prepare for the inevitable, Charles Weston's takeover attempt. Olivia took her seat beside me, handing me a folder. Weston and Company officially submitted an offer to acquire Sinclair Enterprises, she whispered. They think we're weak. I glanced at the documents. The offer was aggressive. Weston wanted to buy out Sinclair at a reduced value, taking advantage of our current instability. He assumed I was inexperienced, that I would fold under pressure. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I turned to the board. We're not selling. A few murmurs spread across the table. One board member, Robert Langley, cleared his throat. Logan, we understand your pride, but this is business. Weston's offer is a safety net. It guarantees stability. I narrowed my eyes. You call selling out stability? My father built this company from the ground up. It's not for sale. Langley sighed. Your father knew when to pick his battles. I leaned forward. So do I. And I'm choosing to fight. A tense silence filled the room. Then Olivia spoke up. We've been analyzing Sinclair's financials. The company isn't as weak as Weston thinks. If we make the right moves now, we can push through this storm without handing over the keys. Langley shook his head. And what if you fail? Smirked. Then at least we went down fighting. I stood up, ending the meeting. The board wasn't fully convinced, but I had made my stance clear. Weston wouldn't take this company without a battle. Later that evening I received an unexpected call. Olivia was still in my office when my phone rang. I put it on speaker. Logan, came the smooth, confident voice of Charles Weston. I have to say, I admire your determination. I leaned back in my chair. Cut to the chase, Charles. He chuckled. I'm offering you a way out. Sell now, and you walk away a very wealthy man. Refuse, and you'll be left picking up the pieces of your father's legacy. I met Olivia's gaze. She shook her head subtly. We both knew what this was. Weston was trying to intimidate me. You made your offer, I said. My answer is no. Weston sighed. Then I hope you're ready for what's coming. The call ended. Olivia exhaled sharply. That was a threat. He nodded. Let him come. He'll see exactly what I'm capable of. The next battle had begun, and I was ready. The next morning I called an emergency meeting with Olivia and the remaining senior executives. The time for passive defense was over. If Weston wanted a war, I was ready to fight back. Weston will start targeting our investors next, Olivia said, flipping through a report. He'll try to convince them that Sinclair Enterprises is unstable under your leadership. He nodded. Then we get to them first. Robert Langley, who had been skeptical of me before, leaned forward. How exactly do you plan to do that? Smirked. By showing them something better than Weston's empty promises. Progress. For the next 48 hours, Olivia and I worked tirelessly, calling our top investors and key stakeholders. I scheduled meetings, reassuring them of the company's stability and outlining my plans for Sinclair's future. Some were hesitant, but I wasn't just asking them to believe in me. I was showing them results. We launched an aggressive PR campaign, highlighting new projects, employee support initiatives, and an expansion plan that my father had never pushed forward. It was bold, risky even, but it sent a clear message. Sinclair Enterprises was evolving, not crumbling. By the end of the week, the tides had shifted. The stock began stabilizing, and word got back to me that Weston's takeover plan was facing resistance. Investors weren't as eager to jump ship as he had hoped. But Weston wasn't done. The next morning the headlines hit. Scandal at Sinclair. Secret financial troubles exposed. I slammed the newspaper onto my desk. Olivia stood beside me, reading over my shoulder. "This is a hit piece," she muttered. "Weston must have leaked false information." I clenched my fists. "Then we expose the truth." I called a press conference. Standing at the podium, cameras flashing, I didn't defend myself. I went on the offensive. "Sinclair Enterprises is not for sale," I announced. "These recent claims are nothing but a desperate attempt to undermine our success. I won't let outside forces dismantle what we've built." The media ate it up. I delivered my message with confidence, and by the time I left that stage, I knew I had turned the narrative in my favor. That night, I received another call from Weston. His voice was colder this time. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Logan." Chuckled. "That's the idea." He sighed. "Then let's see how long you can keep this up." The war was far from over, but I was no longer on the defensive. I was fighting back. The next few days were brutal. Weston escalated his attacks, pushing false rumors and using backdoor tactics to pressure our board members. I knew he was waiting for me to break, but he had underestimated one thing. I had learned from the best. My father had built this company through resilience, and I wasn't about to let it crumble. Olivia burst into my office one morning, her face lit with excitement. "We found it." I looked up. "Found what?" She placed a file on my desk. "Proof of Weston's insider dealings. He's been making shady moves, bribing investors to pull out of Sinclair." A slow smile spread across my face. This was exactly what we needed. I wasted no time. That afternoon, we leaked the information to a trusted journalist. Within hours, the news exploded. Weston's corrupt takeover scheme exposed. The scandal rocked the business world. Investors who had been considering Weston's offer quickly backed away, and Sinclair's stock saw an unexpected surge. The next day, Weston himself walked into my office, his confidence shaken. He tried to regain his composure, but I could see the cracks in his arrogance. "You've made quite the mess," he said, forcing a smirk. I leaned back in my chair. "No, Charles. I cleaned up yours." He sighed, adjusting his tie. "Let's make a deal." I shook my head. "No deals. You tried to destroy my father's legacy. You don't get a seat at this table." His jaw tightened. He stood up, glaring at me. "You'll regret this." Smiled. "Doubt it." Weston stormed out, and just like that, the battle was over. Sinclair Enterprises was secure. I had won. That a week later, I stood in the boardroom, looking at the faces of the people who had doubted me. Langley, once my biggest critic, now gave me a nod of approval. "As chairman," I announced, "I'm committed to leading Sinclair into the future. This company was my father's dream. Now it's mine." The room erupted into applause. As I walked out of the meeting, Olivia joined me. "Your father would be proud," she said softly. I exhaled, feeling the weight of the past few weeks finally lift. "Yeah," I murmured. "I think so too." I had stepped into my father's shoes, not because I had to, but because I chose to. And I was just getting started. Then,